Well, good evening and welcome into this special edition of the IdahoSports.com Prepcast. This is an off-season roundtable discussion. We'll be doing these periodically throughout the summer. Think of it like a State of the Union of Idaho high school activities and athletics. My name is Brandon Bainey. I'm just kind of the facilitator tonight. We're going to lean on our experts from all over. Every corner of the state is covered tonight with all of our regular Prepcast and podcast contributors. Let's start with our East Idaho resident and expert. This is the host of the East Idaho Prepcast every week during the season on IdahoSports.com, Sean Kane. Sean, you cover District 5 and 6 athletics week in, week out. You are representing East Idaho tonight. Are you ready for that mantra?
It's not hard to represent the best in the state, but we'll give it our best shot, But yeah, definitely excited to jump in and see what everyone is kind of thinking on these issues we're going to hit tonight.
Yeah, for sure. The big topic we're going to talk about is classification. Reclassification cycle is up after next year. And are we going to tweak the numbers? Are we not? So, Sean, hang tight. Also joining us tonight from District 4, our host of the Magic Valley Prepcast every week, coming to us live from the great city of Jerome, the steely gaze of Scott Burton. Scott, what's going on?
Hey, you knew I couldn't shy away from having some sort of costume or mask or some stupid introduction. But hey, just getting ready to dive into this. It should be really, really interesting because there's a lot hanging in the balance right now for a lot of these schools.
Scott also has the double pleasure of not only being a broadcaster and podcaster for IdahoSports.com, but you're also right there on the front lines as the athletic director at Jerome High School. So you are a resource that we can really tap into because you know all the scuttlebutt. You know exactly what's going down. So,
well, as long as I can pretend I do and people think I do, then I keep my job.
That's right. We're just trying to get you to next season, buddy. So we'll do our best not to tank
you and everybody else.
Yeah, take your prospects there. So this is Scott Burton from the Magic Valley representing District 4. Also here tonight, our host of the Treasure Valley Prepcast, where we talk about District 3 athletics week in, week out. Coming to us from Middleton tonight, it's Logan Green. LG, what's going on?
Hey, Brandon. They have to be more politically correct. I got nothing to lose here. So I'm going to let it fly. How about that?
I will tell you, Logan, you are the bad guy tonight. You are representing the state of Ada.
I know. Let's hear it. Let's hear it. I love all their conspiracy theories that everybody over here hates everybody else, and it's not true. Sorry, guys. So
yeah, we'll see if we can break bread tonight with all of our different regional podcasters. Also joining us from up north, he hosts the North Idaho Prepcast every week and covers District 1 and 2 activities. Ryan Skaggs. What's up, Skaggs?
What's going on? The state of Ada does hate everybody, by the way, for the record. Just FYI.
Already.
I'm perfect at making best friends down in District 3, too, if anybody knows about high school basketball season. So,
yeah, that was a fun time where the Eagle girls basketball team made warm-up shirts because of something you said on social media. That was you broke the fourth dimension there and came in. So finally tonight we also have Paul Kingsbury. He is the founder, the lifeblood, the heartbeat of IdahoSports.com, and really you have seen it all. You've been doing this now for what, 25 years?
It's been a long time. I did find out during the pre-show meeting that I'm emeritus. I was actually booted out of the entire organization, apparently, without my knowledge, but I'm going to stick around anyway.
Yeah, it's a hostile takeover of IdahoSports.com. Yeah. So, all right, let's bring everybody in now. We'll get everybody up on the screen here. Little Quint box action. We want to let everybody know that's watching tonight live. First of all, thanks for joining us. We're broadcasting on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel, Facebook page, and Twitter account. And we want to hear from you, the fans. This is why we're doing this. These are big topics that affect everybody all around the state, like Jeremy Monroe. He is currently a coach at Eagle High School, formerly at Jerome. And so Jeremy, of course, knows Scott Burton, like everybody. And he also says we love Skaggs. He's 1 in a billion. Of course, Jeremy.
That's a negative. Yeah. That's not a good comment.
Yeah,
that's not.
So a little quick backstory from Jeremy and the Eagle girls basketball team. They had to play Lake City in a state play-in game earlier this year to go to state basketball. Lake City was very good. Eagle was very good as well. Ryan kind of made the bold prediction, 1 in a billion, chance. The Eagle
was
win.
Lake City by a billion is what I said. But yeah.
But anyways, we get to state and the Eagles got these warm-up shirts that say 1 in a billion on them. And I loved it. So it was great.
That's awesome. Oh, that was super awesome.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for my shirt, by the way, but yeah.
There you go. So yeah, the topic tonight is reclassification and enrollment numbers. The Idaho High School Activities Association just held a meeting last week where this was kind of the big topic. And again, we want to hear from you, the fans, whether you're on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube tonight. If you like this video and then share it, retweet it, everybody that can't be here live tonight can go back tomorrow, next week, even next month, because it'll still be a timely discussion. And so the more people that like it and share it, easier it is for everybody else to find it. But for those that are here tonight, we want to hear from you because this is really, we want it to be a fan-driven discussion. Doug Swanson, our good friend from East Idaho, Kingsbury for president 2024.
I'd make some changes, that's for sure.
We still have somebody with memory issues though, but yeah.
He didn't specify if it was president of the country or president of the IHSAA. He didn't specify.
I'll drop my application in. See how it
Yes. Yeah, for sure. So yes, we're talking about classifications. They do this every 2 years in the state of Idaho. They look at the enrollment numbers. They do a fall count and a spring count, and they average the enrollment numbers together. And then that's what they use to determine, okay, who's moving up, who's staying put, who's moving down. But what we've seen the last couple of years is kind of this widening of the gaps where there's a lot of 1A teams and 5A starting to get really crowded and 4A a little bit too. And then the middle is kind of withering away. And so the question was posed, should we tweak the enrollment numbers? So the enrollment committee got together and worked really hard on this. Tall Gropp, the athletic director at Timberline High, was the head of the committee, and he put a lot of hard work into this. Every district, every classification was represented on this committee. And here is what they came up with. If we want to pull up the enrollment parameters. So under the old system, you can see, 5A, 1280 and above, 4A, 640 to 1279, 3A, 320 to 639, 2A, 160 to 319, 1A, D1, 85 to 159, and then 1A, D2, 84 and below. That's on the left of your screen. The newly proposed parameters are on the right, and the numbers change slightly. The biggest change is at 6A, which is, they would still have 6 classifications under this new system, but they would get rid of 1A, D1 and 1A, D2. And then go 6A down to 1A like Oregon and Utah do. But the big change, 6A, 1,400 and above instead of 1,280. That's a pretty significant difference. You look at 4A and 5A, you're looking at a difference of 60 students, 640 to 700 on the back end. 4A, which previously was 3A, would be 350 to 699. 3A, 175 to 349. 2A, 90 to 174. And 1A is 89 and below. So I'm going to go to Scott first, only because he is an athletic director in the state of Idaho. Scott, when you first saw these newly proposed enrollment numbers, what was your initial reaction to that?
Well, the first thing that I noticed was where all of the movement lies, and everything right now is falling in that 5A, 4A, kind of that right on that line, because, with the new system, all of a sudden, the 5A, which would be the 6A, they're all the way down just to 19 schools. And the 4A, which would be the 5A, is now up to 28. And if you kept it the old way, those numbers are completely flopped. So I think a lot of the argument is going to be right in that area. The 4As, the 5As, who's on the line and who isn't. Because, honestly, if you're one of those smaller schools in the 4A, why would you want the new system? Because all of a sudden, you're battling against 1,400 kids in a school and you're sitting at 700. That's twice your size. And so those schools are going to have something to say about it, But that's what jumped out to me first. Not saying one's better than the other, but I'm just saying that's what jumped out.
Yeah, and in these discussions, we're always going to talk about the small schools, right, Melissa? And hey, as you're commenting tonight, let us know where you're watching from too. That'll give us an idea of what area, what level you're kind of representing with your point. But Melissa says, I wish they would have just added the 6A and let the 1A classifications alone. So I think Melissa is saying, let's go 7 classifications, 6A down to 1A D2 still. Doug Swanson wants to ask about Shelley, Scott, where this is where we've seen it, where Shelley was a 3A school not that long ago. They had to move up to the 4A level, and first couple of years really took their lumps across the board. But since then, we saw their football team has gotten, into the playoffs the past couple of seasons. Their girls basketball team got all the way to the state championship game this year. So it can be done. But it's hard, right, Sean? It's hard for, and you see this in Pocatello. You're a teacher at Century High School, and even just looking at Century's enrollment versus Pocatello High, there's a pretty big difference.
Or Preston, right? Preston is going to be 700 kids, and Pocatello is going to have 1,500. I mean, it's a numbers game, right? When you get into big sports like football and track, those numbers play such a huge important role, and man, it's a lot of head scratching when you kind of look at where some of those 4A, 5A kind of congestion, like Scott was talking about, line up. So, I know Preston, talking to some people from Preston, they're just kind of like, man, they can't catch a break. They can't get anyone near them. They're just going to raise the numbers. But yeah, Shelley struggled for a while. They're now not struggling, but now they're going to be competing against even bigger schools. So that's a tough scenario for them.
Yeah, so Melissa is watching tonight in North Idaho around Weippe. That's where Timberline High School is, of course, and in Orofino area. Gary Jones, one of our great broadcasters for IdahoSports.com. As an announcer, I'm glad I won't have to say 1A D1 and 1A D2 anymore. I used to refer to them as the big small schools and the little small schools. I guess, Logan, when you get down to, and this is kind of, I think, the perception from the Treasure Valley is it's all 5A, 5A SIC, 4A SIC, and who cares about the small schools? But there's a lot of those small schools in the Treasure Valley that will be affected by this.
Yeah, I mean, you look at let me preface this. I live in Canyon County. It's a little different over here on the west side of the tracks.
Pull up the map.
This is not Ada County over here. So anyway, out here, there's how many 3A schools out, the SRV, right? And, you got all the 1A schools, and we'll get to them, right? The 1A schools that are in this discussion with the private schools. I know that's been a hot topic, but there is a lot to say around here. And here's the thing. I'm not as tied into this like as Sean and Scott are. So maybe my opinion, you guys will just roll your eyes at it, with these things. But, when I look at and I'm sure we'll go into it, I look at the schools, I look at this, I personally just there's just so many ways you can chop this up, and it's not going to make anyone happy at the end of the day. Okay. Yeah. 700 playing a 1,400. We don't like that. Okay. So let's move it to 800. And now you got the 3A saying, I don't want to play against a team with 700. I only have 320. No one's going to be happy with it. No one is. And we just got to, play the game. The good teams are going to be good. The bad teams are going to be bad. It doesn't matter the classification. I mean, look at Cary. They go up to D1. Everybody's like, oh, Cary's going to stink. What do? They just win there too.
So that's actually what Tall Grop said during the meeting, and he was like you mentioned, kind of, in charge of all that. And he said, no one's going to be happy, and you're never going to make everybody happy. I mean, I remember you mentioned I'm old at the beginning. I remember back in 2000, Sean, I think it was, when they divided up, and Century won the football championship in year 1 of their school. And that was what A1 Division 2 is what they were, which is now 4A. And I remember when that happened, and it was, hell was raised. And that was before they went to the 5A, 4A, 3A, which the rest of the country, most of them had. And Idaho was still at 1A, 2A, A1, A2, A3. So you're never going to make anybody happy. There's going to be grumbling for a while, and then everything settles into place. In the meantime, like you guys just said, the good teams are going to win, and the teams that don't win need to get better.
Yeah. And like you said, Paul, every school will have their own self-interests here. Sure. Devin Barker comments, I would love some extra cushion in the new 2A numbers. New Plymouth has been close to moving up to 3A, and that would not be a good move, right? So if you're a New Plymouth fan, you're going, yeah, no, let's keep it where it is. So we are a little more, against schools of our size. Allison wants to know, what classification will Madison be in? Madison is not affected by this. If it goes to 6A, they're going to be 6A. If it stays the same, they're going to be 5A.
They're always going to be big.
Yeah, but so Ryan, I want to bring you in on this because this is a big topic that's been talked about, where these 5A communities that have one school, Rigby and Madison in the east, but where you live up north in Post Falls, right? Post Falls High School is getting to its capacity in terms of students that can be in the hallways, right?
Yeah, and there's the votes coming in Post Falls to split that school. I mean, this district owns the property to expand. That's in the near future. And you look at Lakeland's growth. The one thing, if you look at the 6A, the new IEL that it would be, with only 3 5A or 3 6A schools and 3 5A schools, with Lewiston going down a classification. Lewiston's double the enrollment of Moscow, literally double the enrollment. And, you look at what they already play now, there is no competitive balance between those two schools. And I posed the question, this could be another argument for another time in another classification prep cast, but why do we need 6 classifications? Why can't we have 5 and level the playing field? I mean, if you really look at, you can eliminate the 3As essentially, and you knock the top half up, knock the bottom half down. And we'll do this in an article this summer, but I've ran the numbers on this, and I proposed it back in 2017 when I was coaching, and it made more sense numbers wise. We've since added a few more high schools now, especially down in the Treasure Valley, but it made a lot of sense to go to 5 classifications and add a 6th for contact sports. That to me made way more sense than this argument now, to where you've literally got to double the enrollment spread at one of the classifications with the most high schools in it, being the new 5A. I mean, I grew up in Washington, and going to Clarkston, and it was, we were a 3A high school at the time, so we were playing Seattle schools. In little old Clarkston, Washington, you go across the state and you'd be playing, schools with 13, 14, 1,500 students, to where we're at, 780, 800 on the regular, but it was a numbers game. But now, they've adjusted theirs. They have a rolling, revolving enrollment across the border in Washington, to where they're spread at their upper level. Their spread in enrollment, I think, is like 250 at the higher level. I know that they have more high schools to draw from, but it makes sense almost at the upper levels to get rid of that extra classification. And with Post Falls, being at that cusp of spreading their wings and going to 2 high schools in that district, you're going to lose another upper echelon school for enrollment wise. They're going to be 2 5A schools if they split. Coeur d'Alene's looking at probably adding a 3rd high school probably in the next 8 years as well. That's going to be the same situation, to where now you lose all of 6A in North Idaho if enrollment numbers stay the same, and then you're going to be left with 16 6A schools statewide. I mean, it doesn't make a ton of sense to me to move that number up. I mean, I know the IHSA has to do something about it, but it just, to me, that it didn't compute to have that 6 classification system.
Yeah, and this conversation, I think, Logan, really got started in the 5A SIC, where this conference just keeps ballooning and ballooning. Yeah. It had 13 teams this past year. If the numbers stay the same, they don't change the parameters, you're looking at adding, like 15 to 16 teams in one district. And so the other point that was brought up at the IHSA meeting last week, as Braden Spalding, broadcaster for us at IdahoSports.com, he says, I think this will be a good idea, good for our athletes. And Melissa says she agrees. We struggle getting athletes to turn out, but the bottom line is it's all about our athletes. And that is at the end of the day, we're trying to, because Scott, we talked about this with Wood River's football program, where they successfully petitioned down to the 3A level, even though they are a 4A school, because they had a hard time just getting players out and building any type of success. But now their first year playing as a 3A school, Scott, they made the playoffs and got a little bit of positive momentum there. And Cody, brings up a good point as well. Look at Middleton's numbers and facilities and look at Emmett's numbers and facilities and tell me they should be in the same conference. Well, if these changes happen,
Moscow and Lewiston, man.
yeah, they will be back, and we'll take a look at who would be moving up and who would be moving down in just a second. But Scott, I wanted to get back to that point of it's hard to get athletes out to compete nowadays, and especially if you're a program that's just getting your teeth kicked in, week out, because you are one of the smaller schools in your classification.
Yeah, and there's so many factors that do play into the success of a school year in and year out. And before I address that, one thing really quick is this new classification thing is not finalized yet.
Right.
They'll vote on that in August. So just so everybody knows, this is not happening as of now. It has a pretty solid chance of passing, but in the recent vote, it only passed 7-6. And when they take that vote again in August, there's going to be 2 of those board members will be gone and replaced with 2 more. So I'm not sure how it's all going to kind of shake out, but if it does pass in August, then this is what we're looking at. If it doesn't, then we're looking at the other thing. So just so everybody's clear on
that. And that's exactly why I wanted to show if the changes do happen, here's what it looks like if we stay the same, because there is a good chance it doesn't pass on the second reading in August. And if that happens, okay, well, here's what the landscape looks like. So that's why I wanted to include everything on tonight's show.
Right. Now, I want to address something really quick, too, because a lot of what is going to happen here is when the IHSA opened up the Pandora's box about petitioning via sport, then we're going to have some movement here. And it's gonna affect some. Let's say we keep the old way, and we have all these. Well, just from our district anyway, Canyon Ridge and Twin are going to jump. Guarantee you, Canyon Ridge is going to petition down for football. So in football, it's not going to be these numbers, and that we're going to have that. And once that started, then competitive equity per sport is going to start showing itself. And then plus on top of that, I mean, you look at the different socioeconomic areas that these schools are in, and then you can find the problems, because some of these schools are living in pretty affluent areas, others not so much, so their makeup isn't the same. And so, yeah, we're talking about numbers, but we're not talking about what those numbers are. And we're not talking about what is the economy like in that particular town, because it is different. And I'll tell you, just from Jerome's point of view, and I'm not sour graping anything, I'm just telling the fact, Twin's got a pretty good makeup of very well socioeconomic status, and a lot of money and that kind of thing. And we don't, so, but we're playing against each other. And so a lot of these schools are going to have to figure that out, because that does play a part.
Yeah, Paul, and that was a point that was brought up at the IHSAA meeting last week. Greg Basic, the athletic director from Skyline, was there, and he said, look, we have to adjust the numbers because there are schools that are getting to their max capacity in the hallways, and everyone goes, oh, we'll just build another school. And he said, basically, have you tried getting a bond passed lately? It's not happening anywhere.
And that's what I was hoping to get and chime in on. We were talking about North Idaho, and well, Rigby's the same way. Madison's the same way. They're packed to the gills, so they're going to have to build more high schools. There's going to be another high school in Rexburg at some point in the near future. There's going to be another high school in Rigby in the near future. Okay, what does that do to numbers? In Kuna, there's another high school built, ready, and they're using it for different things, but it's not ready for athletics. And the last bond a few months ago failed, and part of that bond was to open up that other school as a full functioning school. Failed. So Kuna High School is packed to the gills. So if bonds fail, schools are stuck, right? Unless one of us wins Powerball and just gives each school a few $1 million, they're stuck. But when those bonds do pass, when they are, as soon as schools are built, and even here in the Valley, anything, you got, Rocky Mountain, Eagle, Meridian there, but then there's a lot of space between Owyhee, Ridgeview. That's where all the houses are being built, right? And sure, those houses, it's like here in Kuna, for example, everybody says, well, your population is this much, but it's a bedroom community, which a lot of these places are. So you've got young families moving in with kids that are, 5, 6, 7 years old. Great. Well, when those kids get to be high school varsity age in 9-10 years, that's when the problems are going to happen. And there's not a lot of forethought happening in a lot of school districts saying, hey, in 10 years, we're going to have triple the amount of kids. We've got like 10 plus elementary schools in CUNA, one high school, 1.5 high schools. What happens there? I mean, what do you do? And it just seems to me that there's not a lot of foresight into that. And there's too many people in the community going, well, I don't have kids going to school anymore. I don't care. You want to have them going to school or prison? Pick one. Even when my kids are gone, I'm going to vote for every bond there is. If it's really about the kids, don't vote against bonds.
Yeah,
Doesn't make any sense.
There's going to be a bond coming here in Pocatello for School District 25's proposed a couple different options due to the Highland fire, and regardless, there'll be a bond on the ballot. What it looks like, they're not sure yet, but there's going to be a bond coming up here, and people are already, why would we want $20 property increase? But like the school burnt down. I mean, and it was too small anyways. So
well, right. Yeah, Pocatello's due for another school, right? And my guess is it would be somewhere out in Chubbuck, somewhere out there.
Yeah, they own land.
I don't know what the mascot would be at Chubbuck, but but what happens to Pocatello High School, for example, who's landlocked against the tracks, and Chubbuck opens up? There's just all these things you have to look at, but every school has their own problem. And I don't know, sometimes I think we try and fix every little thing instead of just saying, here's the rules, everybody go.
Yeah,
what did I miss? What did I miss, guys?
The Chubbuck mascot.
Yeah, I think everyone's picturing a mascot in their head. That did happen.
I'm forever 12 years old. I can't help it. Sorry.
Wow.
That did happen in Pocatello.
Way to keep it together, Scott.
Yeah, Highland hit its capacity, and they started funneling some of those kids to Pocatello, and now Pocatello is kind of at its max. Yeah. And meanwhile, Century's getting smaller and smaller. And what do you do? That got a laugh from Jeremiah Wynot watching tonight. Of course, he is Case Wynot's dad up there in Lapway. And, that's another interesting. Lapway is kind of the unicorn where they're a 1A school, but they go play 5As and they win. So they're.
Well, they took care of my nephew's team this weekend. I thought that was kind of funny. My nephew's texting me. He's like, well, we played Lapway. They were really good.
Yeah. This is an interesting point from Melissa too. As it pertains to football, and football especially, you got to be real diligent with how you divvy things up, because you could see an 8-man school having to bump up to 11-man. And she said it's going to be interesting, especially for us smaller schools in towns. And again, she's from Weippe, where Timberline is, and Timberline
I'm probably related to her. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Timberline went from not having a team a couple of years ago to now being a strong playoff team. But Scott, this is something we've seen in the Magic Valley pretty recently with Valley High School, where Valley was kind of an 8-man power. They had to move up to 11-man for a brief sojourn and kind of took their lumps. And now they're back at the 8-man level trying to get reacclimated.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and Melissa makes a great point, because, I mean, when you talk about anything dealing with sports in high school, most of the time, a lot of the time, it's going to be driven a lot by football. That's just the engine that drives sports. And so a lot of it is centered around that. But that is a really good point. And Valley went through all that, and they were really, really good 8-man. They had a great class come through and only needed 8 dudes to do that. But when you graduate that and you try to find 3 more dudes, and the scheme is completely different. The space is different. I mean, the style and everything is so different. And essentially what you're doing is you're adding 6 players, because you're putting 3 on offense, 3 on defense. And that is a tough jump. And so, yeah, that has to be considered as well.
For sure. And I should clarify, Melissa is in Orofino, but she has kids that go to both Orofino and Timberline High School there in Weippe. So, okay, let's take a look at, what would actually change, which schools would move up, who would stay put, who would move down, if these changes were implemented. Let's start with who's moving up. And we've got it kind of side by side. If things stay the way they are, you can see on the left side of your screen here, there is a whole boatload of teams that would be moving up. You're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 4A schools. Caldwell, Canyon Ridge, Idaho Falls, Pocatello, Ridgeview, Skyline, Twin Falls, all moving up. Bear
Good.
Lake, Coal Valley are moving up regardless. Doesn't matter. They're too big. Same with like Vision Charter and Council and Hagerman and Kendrick. Tri-Valley, because they take schools from Midvale and Cambridge, they would actually be bumped up to 1A D1 with the two schools enrollments. And then you would also see Grace move up to 2A. So they would have to go from 8-man, and they just played in the 8-man championship in football. They'd have to play 11-man football. Wendell would have to move up to 3A, and they're already, up against it in 2A. But it's kind of cleaner if the newly proposed guidelines are implemented. You're looking at a smaller number of teams. Where we had 7 teams just making the jump from 4A to 5A, you've only got 7 teams jumping up, period. And so, Sean, I want to go to you first because there's a lot of East Idaho teams, Idaho Falls, Skyline, Pocatello, that all of a sudden, if the old way stays in, you're looking at a mega conference all of a sudden in East Idaho with Rigby and Madison and Highland and Pokey and Skyline. And all of a sudden, okay, this is a conference that maybe could compete with the SIC in terms of numbers.
And that's kind of the point that I look at is either which way you move it, how does the conferences end up? We have power to change everything else, but conferences anyways, that's another discussion. That'll be a me and Ryan side discussion podcast. But even look at the old way. Now you've got a huge 5A competitive conference that's going to get more reps to state. And like a lot of the comment from the people online is it's about the athletes. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that. And what's for the athletes is the opportunity to go to state. And if you have a big conference, you get the opportunity to go to state. Small conference opportunity is small. And so, like looking at it that way, I think that's good. To have the big conference. But, like you said, you can't make everyone happy. But I think when you look at changing numbers and stuff, the most important thing that I think coaches look at is what happens to my conference and my reps to state in whatever sport that is. Mm-hmm. And to me, I think that's the most important issue that kind of everyone worries about the numbers and the size, but what happens at the end of the day with the conferences is what I'd be concerned about. And for East Idaho, the conference thing is it's going to be huge either way, which it goes.
Yeah, John. And it's just one of those things to make these decisions and votes and everything else. It's going to be really hard for the people that are voting or the people that are sharing their opinions to step away from their own personal ties to a school, because everybody's going to want to fight for what's best for their school. And that's going to be their kind of initial reaction. So it's going to be a tough thing to separate and look at a bigger picture, and I think that's going to be a battle that people are going to have when they discuss this topic.
For sure. We've got, real quick. Sorry, Ryan. And then I'll bring you in Juan Alvarado in the chat. He is the newly hired head football coach at Canyon Ridge High School. Congratulations, Juan. Good luck in year 1. But he says, I saw an idea on Twitter about having a football classification of its own. How would that work? And I will answer your question in just a second, Juan. But using Canyon Ridge as the jumping off point here, Scott, I wanted to ask you really quickly, when they did the fall enrollment count, only Canyon Ridge would have been moving up. But then in the spring enrollment count, all of a sudden Twin Falls was moving up as well. So at the time in January, we were talking about, oh man, Canyon Ridge, either way, you're going to have to go 2 hours to Boise, 2 hours to Pocatello. But now if it was, let's just say things stayed the way they were and it was Canyon and Twin both moving up, would they just have their own 2-team district, Scott? Like we see with Wendell and Declo?
I think they're going to the eastern part of the state. I don't think the SIC wants any more party crashers. And I think the eastern part is where they would go. That's just my personal opinion. But either way, the problem that they're going to run into is financial. I mean, if their conference games are going to be 2 hours away, think about what they're doing with busing and the costs of transportation. And are they going to do a Friday night, Saturday? Are they going to, how much school are they missing? That's a huge deal. And it kind of resembles somewhat that big conference that the Great Basin had, the Great Basin 27, that it was at one point, where you had teams like Wood River and Mountain Home traveling all the way to Preston for a conference game. That made no sense. So there's a financial aspect of it too. that these schools are going to have to look at as well when they make this decision.
Yep. Devin in the comments says, I wish they would look at rivalry schools. Bear Lake West Side would be a thing of the past, right? No matter what, Bear Lake is moving up. I mean, you could still schedule them. Travel would be a killer for Bear Lake in terms of their conference a little bit. I mean, I don't know. They would only have to go to Marsh Valley and America. I mean, I guess that is a couple hours to over to like American Falls. Katie agrees with you, Katie Kaufman. And I think she's from Twin. Horrible for finances and for the kids that are missing all that school. Yeah, that's another component we don't really think about is time away from the classroom. Ryan West, he's the head football coach at Timberline Weipe. He says, I like it the way it is. People move away, people move in, and not all kids play athletics. And Logan, that is not crystallized more clearly than at a school like Caldwell, where they have a great soccer program. They're pretty good at swimming, but they really struggle in some of those other sports, despite being, the largest 4A school, and they would move up to 5A under this new system.
I mean, you could say that about a couple of the SIC schools, right? Like Ridgeview, they're always right there on the border, and this is not a knock on anybody. It is what it is, right? They struggle in sports and people not coming out to play sports. And I mean, it's a culture thing, right? That has some to do with it. And, I personally like the way teams can petition, like a Wood River, right? Because, they made it to state this year, right? And I think that's the main thing is people like, well, I don't want this big school coming in and dominating. But that's not happening right now with Caldwell, who's already trying to stay down. I like this comment, Crimea River. It's like Grace and Butte County in the same conference, right? That's a lot of travel.
Well, and Jody is from Grace, so that's
okay, perfect.
That's on the nose.
I got that. I planned it that way. But that's just my thought is that, like you said, not all kids play sports or are good. Just because you are a big school doesn't guarantee that you're going to be having tons of kids come out and play. And, it's, again, it just goes back. I feel like does anybody use Excel like I do? It's a circular equation or whatever you call it. It goes back and forth. It all continues on like a circular reference. That's the name of it. It feeds off other, somebody's going to be happy and somebody's not, no matter what you do with it.
You could have called it anything you want, and we all would have gone. Mm-hmm.
Logan,
Sure.
Logan, I'm gonna dumb it down for everybody. Sure. It's the dog wagging the tail.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you. But I mean, this is kind of jumping around, but I really like Ryan's idea of get rid of something.
Is Ryan's mic still on?
You look at do what?
I got muted like around the horn.
But I just you look at it like the 4A right now. If we talk football, how many teams make it to state?
All of them.
2/3.
Too many.
2/3 of the whole level makes it. Like some teams, and I get it. Everybody wants to go to state, but you don't. If you're not good, you don't go. Like you don't need to go. Yeah, there are some of those games that are not even competitive. Yep. There are some of it shouldn't even be played. And if you're not good, you don't go. And by doing that, you want to go to state, get back. I mean, everybody wants to say no trophy, handout trophies, but you want to be good, be good. Like
I call that the old Yeller theorem. Old Yeller theorem. Sometimes you just got to take those teams out behind the woodshed.
Where the red fern grows, right?
Well, that's right.
So like I played lacrosse in high school, and we were horrendous. Like just horrendous. And it's not like we ever thought, oh, let's move down a classification to get better. It's just I want to be at state. I was like, no, let's just get the season over. We're bad. I do not want to play that team again. And it's
made you the man you are today.
It did. And, it is what it's like. I knew what we were. We are what we thought we were, which was bad. And I was the worst. And I was the worst player on that bad team. So we're talking bad. And that's my. I don't know. Maybe I jumped ahead too much. But
do you have any VHS copies of your games that we could watch?
No, we didn't have IdahoSports.com coming to. They weren't coming out to North Carolina to film low level 4A lacrosse. It's weird.
Weird. All right. So Logan, you kind of teed it up for Ryan, and Ryan was going to say something like 10 minutes ago, and I cut him off. But I don't even know if this is where you were going. But
It's like Rodney Dangerfield lives again. All right, I can't get any respect around here.
yeah, can you kind of explain a little more about maybe getting rid of a classification and going from 6 to 5?
It actually levels the point if it's about fairness or whatever. But that'd be darned. Right? Look at that. But if you want equality as far as leveling your classification to have it narrowing the gap of enrollment from large schools to largest school to small school within your classification, it makes the most sense to get rid of a classification. There's no way around it. You can't do it mathematically other than getting rid of a classification. And you can actually increase your competition level by getting rid of that classification, because you're going to take the top part, taking the lid off of 4A and looking at the middle of that section. And we're talking like from Bonneville to Shelley, right, in that classification section. And then you bring up some of the top schools in 3A to close that gap. That makes a ton of sense if you think about it. And I've even drawn it up. And I mean, like I said, we've talked about doing a prep cast about it this summer, but I drew it up last year. And actually back in 2017, when I proposed this to my then athletic director, the numbers have since changed since then, but still the premise is the same. There's ways of creating new districts. And like, I think we need to redraw our district lines. Some of them do not make sense. I think that there's some like historical, like grasping of straws to keep these districts in place. There's a way of splitting Ada and Canyon County. And there's an easy, feasible way of doing it, especially with the more high schools that have been added. It doesn't make sense to me now that is not a 2-conference area. Like, that makes no sense to me. And you have enough schools to make it necessary. You can split it either north to south using like Chinden as your dividing line, or you can split it east to west using, what is it right there between Meridian and Nampa. I mean, if you're splitting the state of Ada and Canyon County up, there's a feasible way about doing this. But if you go into the hard numbers, and it doesn't even affect the lower number schools. Like if you look at the 1A D1, 1A D2, you're still going to have Kendrick going up. Like that's going to probably happen no matter what anyways. And competitively, that doesn't hurt Kendrick at all. If you look at them and what they're able to do, it's like Jacob's comment. But let's go Indiana. We're all playing 11, man. Screw it. But no, like, and so it comes down to like, somebody made the argument of conferences and what's it going to do to conferences. And I think the bigger tie is what's it going to do to districts? And if conferences be darn, numbers are going to move around. But I think the alignment with districts is where it's really going to come down, because that's where your allotments to the state tournaments happen in many sports, whether it's football or basketball or volleyball or whatnot. I mean, but there is an easy way of cleaning this up. And I really look at it's going to be splitting 3A in half and kind of cleaning up 2A and taking kind of some of the middle ground, because it is such a small classification. There's no sense in having a classification with 32 schools. It just doesn't make sense. But yeah, I mean, I could go off for an hour about that on how to draw that up. But
yeah. Right.
It's yours, man. Go for it.
Tim Belknap, one of our great broadcasters, says, I agree. It makes no sense to have a 3-team conference in Southern Idaho. Sean, I feel like that's a weekly talking point on our East Idaho Prepcast. Why doesn't 3A District 5 and 6 play together? They all play each other anyways in non-conference games. Why not just make it a 6-team conference? But anyways, that's another topic.
We won't go there.
We could look at the IML. I mean, let's look at North Idaho, and you have Timberlake and Bonners Ferry that are fairly close in enrollment to Moscow. I mean, they're not far off from Lakeland as far as competition wise. Like, we could really look at this and hammer it out. I mean, that's a prime example. I look up north. If people want to cry about travel, look at the miles the schools in the north put in. I mean, like, if people really want to complain statewide about travel, there is no easy way of non-league games if you're playing in Kootenai County. There isn't. Like, you're on the road. And, so I think travel is just built on the nature of our state. We don't have a nice middle ground where we have cities strewn across the central part of the state of Idaho. You get like 2 schools. You get Salmon River and New Meadows, and that's it. And then everybody else is either up north or down south. And, so I think travel can't really be used as an excuse too much these days if we want to have balance within the classifications.
Yeah, for sure. More comments coming in. Tom says if things stay the same, Hillcrest and Bonneville will be 5A on the next count. I assume, Tom, you're talking about not 24, 26, but I assume you're talking about 4 years down the road because they're continuing to grow and grow and grow. Justin says Declo and Wendell, and we had another comment talking about how Declo and Wendell, we talk about this a lot, Scott. It's just that 2-team district. Maybe throwing in Aberdeen, it's somewhat close. Stephanie Parker says, and I think she's Bear Lake, traveled from North Gem. We traveled from Bancroft to Leadore, Mackey, and Clark County. It was 3 hours of travel time. And I will say, guys, I'm from Montana, which is a pretty rural state. And we would travel, 4 or 5 hours for conference games sometimes. So the travel part to me in Montana kind of has that built in. They know going in that there's going to be a lot of travel involved, and they kind of help the schools with that a little bit to offset those costs. I'm not sure how Idaho does that exactly, but I did want to circle back. Juan Alvarado, the football coach at Canyon Ridge, asked earlier about, having specific numbers for football only. He said, I saw an idea on Twitter about having a football classification of its own. How would that work? Juan, I will tell you that I lived in Wyoming for a little bit, and this is how Wyoming does it. They don't do it based strictly on enrollment numbers, though. And obviously Wyoming has way, way less population than Idaho does. But the way they do it in Wyoming is they basically take the top 16 schools, and that is the largest classification for basketball, softball, track, all your non-football sports. And then for football, they whittled it down to 12. So they took only the 12 of this biggest of the 16, and then those 4 next smallest jumped down a level. And that was kind of a simple way that they did it. In Idaho, you would have to have a lot more. It wouldn't be that simple, but maybe in football only, you could have where you have your ultra 7As, those big Boise schools. And like Ryan said, maybe adjusting where the middle of 3A is playing the top end of 3A is playing the middle end of 4A. And that's something we could maybe sketch out and have an article about, or maybe a future prepcast. I will say right now, though, without looking at the numbers in front of me, it'd be hard to sketch it out. But that just for reference is how Wyoming kind of did it. They just kind of lopped off, these 4 teams are going to go to the next lowest level. And I will say, Ryan, once you finished calculating all your, getting rid of a classification and what it would look like, we're going to publish that to the website at IdahoSports.com as well. So we talked about which teams would be moving up if things changed or if things stayed the same. Let's take a look at what teams or schools would be moving down. And naturally, this is kind of the opposite of what we saw with who's moving up. If things stay the same, you've got some schools moving down, not a ton. Under the new system, though, you got a lot of teams jumping down. So teams that are moving down regardless, Coeur d'Alene Charter is going to jump down. Cary, Castleford, Centennial Baptist, Gem State, Genesee, Greenleaf, Friends. So it's a lot of 1A D1s dropping down to 1A D2, which is pretty common. We see that, we see that happen pretty frequently. The big story here is if the newly proposed parameters come through, Lewiston and Middleton would both be 5A schools. Parma would drop down to 3A, which I think actually would benefit Parma a little bit. North Star Charter would move down. Sun Valley Community School would have to move down as well. And so I'll go to Ryan and Logan. Ryan, you kind of talked about it already, but having Moscow and Lewiston in the same district, it doesn't feel right to me personally.
Just look at what you've seen on the field. I mean, in the last few years, and Lewiston, in a year where they don't make the playoffs and they, just absolutely drub Moscow in football. Or you look at basketball and it's not competitive. You look at wrestling. The other sports, there are sports that exist other than football. The only thing like I would look at that's competitive is like golf and track, like the non-contact sports. You can have competition there, but like other than that, it's just, man, the discrepancy is just so dang big. Moscow's on the cusp of probably opting down. I mean, I could see Moscow realistically in the IML. Like they're going to be playing Bonners Ferry and Timberlake. Like if this goes through, that's the first thing probably hits the pit desk the next morning is Moscow's application to opt down in contact sports. Like I could see it happening immediately.
Yeah, and Logan, you live in Middleton. Middleton would jump back down to 5A under this. I'm sure they're thrilled about that.
Well, and here's the thing. Like, again, everybody's going to do what they think is best, right? For them, like Scott said, right? Nobody's going to be impartial. They're going to look at it. in my opinion, I guess I have a different opinion of it. Like they move up, and it's not like they've been bad in 5A.
Right.
Like they made the playoffs. They won a game they went to Lewiston and won. They okay, of course it's those two that play, but then they get in the playoffs and they hang with Meridian, right? Like they hang. Softball played well before they fell out of it at the end. I feel like do you want to go down at this point? You've played big and you've competed. Don't you want to stay and get in that? And your baseball team was the number 2 team in the state all year long. Like you won the district. I would personally, again, I don't have kids that go there, but I will, like you guys were talking about, in 5-6 years it'll be there. I don't. You're right. Would it benefit them to play 4A? Yes, but is that what you want to do? Like somebody said, look at Middleton's facilities versus Emmett. I mean, Emmett's played well. They beat Middleton the last few times they played them. I don't know what people's opinion would be on that in town. I'd have to ask more people, but in my opinion, I would view going down as, all right, we're going to go step down here. And after we've already shown that we can compete high, well, let's go down and play lower. I
like that perspective for sure.
Yeah.
Ryan doesn't get enough airtime here on the show. He's got to put comments in to get his questions asked.
No, I posted my list of schools if we did a football only 6A classification.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's what I was posting.
Gotcha.
So if you see, it's like that's your 6A only. Is like Timberline, Boise, Bora, Capital, Eagle, Centennial, Hawaii. I'm just looking at my list that I compiled. And if you had the 5A football only, it's like mixing 4A and 5A currently together to create this super kind of like division.
Yeah.
The 5A would be Blackfoot, Sentry, Pokey, Hillcrest, Skyline, Idaho Falls, Canyon Ridge, Twin, Minico, Jerome, Bishop Kelly, Cuna, Columbia, Skyview, Middleton, Valley View, Ridgeview, Caldwell, and Nampa. So those would be 2 largest football only classifications.
Okay.
Then 4A would consist of Sandpoint, Lakeland, Moscow, Timberlake, Bonners Ferry, Emmett, Weiser, Fruitland, Payette, Homedale, McCall, Wood River, Burley, Mountain Home, Kimberly, Filer, Gooding, Buell, Bonneville, Shelley, Snake River, Teton, Sugar, South Fremont, American Falls, Marsh Valley, and Preston.
Man, that sounds gigantic. That one.
Yeah.
That was
It's a big conference,
Yeah.
but look at the competitive balance on what happens with it. Then it changes significantly.
for sure.
Here's what's called a segue comment.
Yeah, well, okay. So I wanted to get to that in just a second,
Right.
but I want to wrap up the conversation about classification numbers. Do they change? Do they stay the same? Scott, I know you reached out to some people and got some feedback on just this overall process. Can you share with us what you learned?
Can you repeat the question, Brandon?
Yeah, no, it's good. I know you reached out to some people that were involved in this process of tweaking the numbers and how do we settle on what we came up with and some of that behind the scenes on how we arrived at this point.
Yeah, and the thing is, no matter what is chosen, it's going to have to change again. There's so much growth that it's not like we're going to settle in on something and then not have this conversation down the road. And if you look at where the growth is, and this is what one of the things that they were looking at is the growth is at the 5A and the 4A. That's where people are moving to, especially 5A, and that's why you're seeing that huge jump. And you've got to take those things into consideration. Is what is this thing going to look like 4 years from now? Are we going to be redrawing this whole thing again? And then if that's the case, then talk about the separation that you're going to have between the 6A or the 9A or wherever we're at that point down to the, negative 1A. I mean, just think of the discrepancy in numbers if the growth continues to happen the way that it is, and that's something that, they talked about, and I don't know if there's an answer quite yet for it.
Piggybacking off of your mentality, Logan, with Middleton, Dave Sandow, the newly hired football coach at Nampa High School. Good luck in year 1, Coach Sandow. He says here at Nampa, we want in the 6A in football. So he's with you, Logan. We want to play the best.
Nice.
Go at it.
So we're going to pivot to a second part of our conversation. And really, it wasn't something I was planning on talking about coming in, but we got so many comments and so many feedback, and I've gotten so many emails about this topic, and Ryan Harris hits it on the nail right here. What happens to BK? That's Bishop Kelly. Do they continue to play the numbers game to settle into classifications they dominate? And this is going to be part of a larger conversation about what do we do about private schools, charter schools, schools that can be selective when it comes to, taking on students. I'll be honest, a lot of the comments that we've gotten are from people that are in rural communities, and they say, we're tired of playing the private schools from the big cities that have the same number of kids, but they don't really. And I guess, Paul, the crux of this issue, and this is, I feel like every 3 or 4 years, this topic comes up. And it's in every area, right? In North Idaho, Ryan, you've got Genesis Prep. Over in Boise, you've got, too many to count. Logos is in District 2. In the Magic Valley, you've got Lighthouse Christian. In District 5, Sean, you've got like Grace Lutheran and Pocatello. They're a private school. Up in Idaho Falls, you have Taylor's Crossing and Water Springs, and you've got all of these private schools. And so, Paul, the crux, and here's Janet Proul. She is the girls basketball coach at Ledor. She says private schools should play up. And that, I will tell you, that is the overwhelming sentiment that I have gotten from the people that live in the rural communities, Paul. And the crux of it is it fair for Murtaugh and Castleford and Hanson to have to compete against Lighthouse Christian, who, yes, they have the same number of students, but they're in Twin Falls. They are pulling from a larger population base, Paul.
Yes, that is a very good question. And it's a question that I don't have the answer to. I don't think anybody does. And I don't want to play both sides on this, but I'm going to play both sides on this. Because really, if you go to a private school, right, it's because you make that decision to have your kids get what you think will be a better education, smaller class sizes. Maybe it's a religious aspect to it. Great. I'm all for it. However, on the outside of it, from the outside looking in, it's, well, yeah, they have, like, let's take a Lighthouse, right? They have that whole Magic Valley to draw from. They had, kids from Minico coming there, all over the place coming there. And it's not sports recruiting, right? But you can offer, scholarships coming in, and it optics, right? I'm not saying they do it. I'm just saying that's where other people get the ammo, is from optics. And BK's been hammered, for years and years and years and years and years, and they'll continue to be, for that sort of thing. There's billboards in Boise, hey, come to Bishop Kelly. And that's their right to do that. They're not breaking any rules doing that. But should private school, the private school conversation really started, 10, 12, 15 years ago when it got more prevalent. Because before it was Bishop Kelly. That was really the one. There was a few others scattered around, but it didn't make sense to really talk about having their own classification because there wasn't enough. Now, I don't know if there is enough. Like you mentioned, Genesis Prep way up north, Logos there. And you mentioned 5 or 6. There's more than that, obviously, here, but they're really spread out. So, how would you put them together? Would you have a Logos in the same classification as a Bishop Kelly? As far as, you're a private school, get in there. Or are you going to drill it down even further and have big private schools, small private schools? What are you going to do with that? And I think sometimes we try and fix things that aren't broken. And instead of just kind of like what comments we've heard is, builds character to get, slobber knocked once in a while. I don't know. I see a system that we've got that's working pretty well. Be tweaked, sure. But overturning and moving things around, I don't know. But on the private school side, it's a conundrum that's not going to go away. And I think that with the success of all the private schools, there's going to be more. Just like regular high schools, they're going to be building more private schools and more. And, do the best athletes go to private schools? Bishop Kelly's kind of proven that, right? But if it's mainly an art school or things like that, maybe not. So there's a lot to go into it. I know I didn't really give an opinion one way or the other because it's such a multifaceted issue that there's unless you're actually involved. If my kid goes to a private school or my kid plays a private school, if you're not on one fence on one side or the other, it's hard to really know what to do in that situation.
For sure. We've got a couple of comments here, and then I'll go to Scott, because Scott, you looked very pensive as you were sitting there, like you. We're gonna really
Probably just gas.
enlighten us. Janet, again, she's from Ledor. It may build character, but at what point do we say enough's enough? And I'm telling you, Paul, everybody I talk to, they all tell me, no, I'm not going to do the President Trump impression, but everyone I talk to from rural communities are sick of it. They really are. And they've reached their breaking point with it. Chris Carey says, use a multiplier for private schools. Say your enrollment is 300, multiply that by 1.6%, then make them play at that. That's a pretty good compromise. But Scott, we're using Lighthouse as the example here, but there's schools, like I said, in every district that fall under this umbrella. But what are your thoughts on this?
You know what? This is an argument that is going to go on and on and on. And, and you can say what you want, but if you can't see that the private schools have an advantage of some kind, then you're crazy, because they do. Number one, they are maximizing their student population. So if you've got a private school that's 1,000 kids versus a public school that's 1,000 kids, I guarantee you the maximization of that population is going to be with the private school. Most of their kids are playing extracurriculars, doing extracurriculars. In fact, a lot of private schools require that when you come in, so there's all of these little things that make that an advantage. And plus, on top of that, the private school will always control their population. They will always fall wherever they want to fall, and if we do a multiplier, and they don't like it, then they can control their population. I know there's some financial aspects to that as well, but I think another thing that really is something about private schools is they don't have the riffraff that public schools get. Public schools are going to get this population that seems to be growing of just riffraff, of kids that don't do anything. They do nothing but cause trouble. They are going in the wrong direction. And public schools are getting inundated with that. And when you look at a school that is a public school, they are not pulling a large percentage of their student body into extracurriculars. They're just not. And then you talk about the academic side of things as well. I mean, these private schools do get to control who comes in. Whether it's good students, good athletes, they are controlling that. Public schools just, hey, this is what we got, man. And so to say there's not an advantage is crazy. They have a higher socioeconomic profile. They control it all. And in fact, I'll share some stats with you. In a 10-year time period between 07 and 17, football across the board in the country, 56% of those titles were won by private schools. In boys soccer, it was 80%. In girls soccer, it was 77%. Volleyball was 55%. Boys basketball 40 and girls basketball 35. Now, take into consideration what percent of all the schools are private. It's not a ton, but they're a heck of a lot better than a lot of those public schools.
What about Idaho, though?
Can I add something to that, Scott? Because I want to ask you about this since you're an athletic director. The kids that are leaving the school system to be homeschooled or have been homeschooled before they come into the school system, and with this new law now that the districts can be superseded. So if you have a great athlete or a pool of great athletes that may have been homeschooled and they're jumping into the public school system, there's no restriction now on where they can go. They can enter at any point at any school. Aren't we creating a de facto private school system with these kids that are coming out of the homeschool system to play basketball or football or whatever, that maybe the fringe athletes, the parents chose to keep them out from like K through 8?
Well, it depends on kind of where they live, right? So if they're being homeschooled in Jerome, for example, then they are going to be playing in the Jerome district. If they are living in the Jerome district, they can go to a private school. So it kind of depends on where you fall. But that's one of the things is if you wanted to go to a private school outside of your district,
But I'm looking at the metro areas. I mean, if you look at like say Kootenai County or the Boise metro area or even East Idaho, where we're starting to see this stuff move around. Like you could have a kid that was homeschooled K-8 in Coeur d'Alene that mom and dad are like, if he's going to play athletics, and with this new state law that Governor Little approved, like mom and dad could be like, nah, this kid's going to Post Falls. Like we're going to see this movement. I mean, we're creating a transfer portal.
Oh, absolutely. And that's an entirely different discussion, but it does tie into it.
It does. Absolutely does.
Yeah. And that is going to be another roundtable talk. We are going to dive into that specific issue and what could be coming in terms of school choice later on this summer. Jody from Grace High says, even as a bigger 1A school, we rarely make any cuts to our teams. We're having to play with what we can beg to come out. And Scott, I know you run up against the same thing. Doug says you can't just play at any school you want.
Depends on what school you're talking about.
I'm assuming that's tongue in cheek.
Oh, you want to go to private school?
Yeah.
Sean, there's a lot of public schools that just kind of trade kids around out there too. That fly
and that will be a third roundtable talk. Player transfers. That's right. We're kicking that hornet's nest.
What about out-of-state transfers like in Idaho?
Are we really going to get back into that? Are we going to let you are we going to let Brandon and Scott do that one? Or
yeah, we are. That's going to be another roundtable topic this summer as well. Sean, I wanted to bring you in. You're a teacher at Century High School in Pocatello. You're also the tennis coach, and you and I joke all the time. Your biggest rival in tennis coaching is the coach at Bishop Kelly. And right, and Scott runs into the same thing as a 4A athletic director. It is kind of the BK problem, but now there's so many schools that fall into this umbrella. What is the perception in East Idaho? Because I feel like East Idaho is a little bit behind everywhere else in terms of private
everything,
charter schools popping up. Well, I wasn't going to say everything, but
there's not a ton of the private school thing here. And yeah, John Armstrong goes to BK, and he actually brought up an interesting point: is a lot of the kids don't want to go to Bishop Kelly now because they want to be at a school that's a 5A school or a 6A school. So he was actually, they've had a lot of movement that way just because, they don't think they're going to get recruited as well being from, a 4A because you're not playing the best in the state. And I mean, that's a whole nother thing either. But of course I don't like Bishop Kelly, but is that what you're asking me?
Well, I don't think that was actually the question.
That wasn't the question, but I'll take the answer.
But I'm more on Logan's side, like, if they've got this kind of the same amount or whatever, as long as the numbers aren't crazy, get better, find a way to beat them. Nothing. I don't know if there's any greater feeling than beating the private school when you're just, from East Idaho and it's you coach the kids, you've got the programs, and then you beat them. Man, that's rewarding. It feels good.
Yeah.
So it's a tough scenario, but yeah, they've got a lot more. The private schools. What I'm going to see happening, because we just talked about this, is all the schools are jammed to capacity. Like they want their kid to get an education. Well, maybe I'll go to this private school now, and I could see that happening more, especially in East Idaho, as you saw all the movement in the 4A and 5A in East Idaho. The schools are just crammed. They're just crammed. I know, Rigby is just crammed to capacity. I know Hillcrest was talking 2 lunches at one point because they had so many people, and just all those different things like that. So I would see more private schools maybe in the future if school districts don't move with the times, right? I mean, parents don't want their kids in a class with 40 kids. That's what I see as a parent and a coach happening maybe in East Idaho, is you're going to see some alternate education means because the schools districts aren't moving in a progressive way to fit the needs of the communities.
Yeah. Nick says track NIL money and booster contributions and make that a factor in this. It's all about the dollar bills anymore. Sports are ruined. All money anymore. College especially. I don't know that that's really seeped into the high school yet to the level we're seeing it in the college, but I hope we don't get there. But we'll see. Logan, obviously there are tons of private and charter schools in the Treasure Valley. In some conferences, the private schools almost outnumber the schools from, Marcy, New Plymouth,
Right.
actual communities. 2-3 years ago, North Star Charter had a baseball team for the first time, and they made it to state, and I was covering that tournament, and I was talking to their coach. Okay. Oh, Juan.
We didn't talk about that today. Me and Juan, we didn't.
Yeah. Oh man, Juan, that's funny. Okay, I'm gonna take that off before we get in trouble. Logan.
So here's my. Go ahead, Brandon. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was talking to the coach of North Star Charter, and he said basically, I decided to start a team at North Star Charter because I saw kids that were getting cut at Rocky Mountain and Meridian and Mountain View, and I said, these kids are good enough to play baseball. Come play at North Star Charter. And that's the crux is, especially in the Treasure Valley, kids from bigger schools that don't quite make the cut can go to a 1A school all of a sudden and be excellent.
Okay, here's my thing on this, right? And I know Scott's numbers thing there, and I know everybody apparently hates Bishop Kelly. But like,
love you, John.
It's been years since they've won a football championship. I mean, it hasn't been they went to the finals this year, but
look at all the other
that's because
sports.
Skyline should be fun.
Okay, let's take the Treasure Valley, right? This is where there's a lot of them. How many state basketball tournaments, Brandon, have we done at 1A where they just get pummeled into the ground when they show up at state? Liberty Charter, Victory Charter. It happens. We're not seeing Grace Lutheran come out and beat the brakes off anybody. Water Springs may make it to state, but they're not making it to the finals. We talk baseball. All the private schools, most of them at the baseball level, are here in the Treasure Valley. What do? They go up north and get their butt kicked by the teams from, by everybody up there. Kendrick, Potlatch, everybody up there takes care of business. Just what we've seen, at least in my short time. Again, haven't been around it as much as some of y'all have. I just have not seen where they are completely taking over and taking away experience. If it is all about the kids, and now we say, oh, make them have their own league, how does that? I just don't know how that helps those kids that go there that maybe they don't care. I'm not trying to be the top of my competition. I want to play basketball for fun, and there's not a lot of us here. Maybe this is a more educational-based school rather than an athletics-based school. And, hey, we got hot and we won our districts and we made it to state. Now everybody hates me because my team got hot and we made it to state. I guess in recent, you're right, okay? You can look at other sports like BK has been great at tennis, great at golf, obviously. Coal Valley Christian's been great at golf, at some of these bigger levels, though, it doesn't seem to be happening, at least to my eyes, as much as maybe, it takes one loss when you're really good, right? Let's just say, you're a 1 seed and you play the 8 seed that's a private school and they beat you. Suddenly, there's your crutch to hang on. It was a private school. That's why we lost. And that's my thought. I'm not seeing this. I don't care. Like Paul said, there's two sides of this. And maybe it is happening more than I know of, and I can't claim to know that it's happening. Maybe in the trenches, maybe they're stealing people. So, but that's just from what I've seen lately. It just doesn't seem, at least on the surface, and maybe that's why there hasn't been as much of a conversation deeper, because at the quote, like you said, Scott, football drives a lot of stuff. It's just not happening outside of a BK being good here and there.
Yeah. With all that being said, I mean, we can trash on BK all we want, but if we were in their shoes, we'd be doing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So let it, let's make sure that we're clear that, I mean,
they haven't won a title in football since what, 15? They haven't won a title in boys basketball.
But it's not just football. They dominate in track, tennis, volleyball, basketball. And Paul, I want to wrap up with you.
Does anybody really care about tennis though? I mean, who cares about tennis?
Hold on just a second.
I don't care about tennis coaches.
Soccer, the whole 9 yards. But one more thing, Brandon, really quick on that too. And this sort of tells a little bit of the story. How many academic state championships have they won?
They win the School of Excellence a lot.
Okay, so now what is that? Okay, so again, what does that tell you about the makeup of their kids? That's the whole argument. It's not about they've got X amount of numbers and go get better and all. They have got the best of the best right there. They are maximizing their population. That is the difference between a school like Bishop Kelly, what they can control, versus a public school who can't control it. That's a huge difference. And look at like I said, the academic state championships. That tells you a little bit about the caliber of kids that they have there. And it makes it a heck of a lot easier to get better at something when you have all of that to work with. Now, I'm not bashing Bishop Kelly. That's just a fact. That's just the way it is. I would be doing the same thing.
So only smart kids can be good at basketball, Scott?
No, but they have an academic. No. But
no wonder I wasn't good at basketball.
Standards. They have the athletic standards. I mean, all of it ties together in that private school. And good on
you're
them.
right.
Yes.
I have a great example 22 miles away in Spokane with Gonzaga Prep. And, like you look at the private schools in the state of Washington and how did they counter that in the state of Washington? Opt up a classification where it makes sense. If it becomes a safety issue with enrollment, like for football, no, you get to go down. But like the competitive balance makes sense that if like Bishop Kelly should be probably right now playing a 5A schedule, it just makes more sense. I mean, you look at, I don't know about Lighthouse Christian enough to know the competitive balance there. I look at Genesis Prep, it doesn't make sense because they don't compete in all of the varsity sports. I think they have like 6 sports for girls and 5 sports for boys or something like that. So some of the schools, it just doesn't make sense because of the enrollment numbers. But for the larger schools, by and large, of the private level, it makes sense to make them opt up at least a classification. I like that rule with the state of Washington putting that in because it did change the competitive balance.
When everything was going on with Genesis Prep a few years ago, they actually volunteered, if I remember right, to go 3A. They said, "Hey, we'll go 3A," and they weren't allowed to. So I mean, everybody was bagging on Genesis Prep at the time, but they're like, "Hey, we'll go 3A if you want us to," and they weren't allowed to. So. Yeah, just I want to mention they tried to do the right thing,
Yeah. Yep. And Ryan in the comments, Logan's got a good point. Lighthouse was pretty dominant at 1A D2, but after moving to D1, where the competition is much better, pretty middle of the road team, and yet they still got the state in basketball their first year. They made it to the state football playoffs. And Paul, I want to wrap up with you for this final point before we sign off here. I think the resentment is not just championships, because Logan's right. Private schools generally in Idaho aren't winning a lot of championships outside of BK. But I think what people are tired of is I live in Marcine, and every year Nampa Christian, Coal Valley Christian are stealing 2 of our spots to go to state. It's all the private schools taking our chance to go compete at state year in, you're out. I think that's where the resentment lies in the smaller communities is we don't even get the chance to go to state because the private schools are taking all the bids every year.
Yeah. And I completely understand where they're coming from. We've got a lot of friends in Dietrich and Cary and I've talked to them and have heard their side of it where we have to use what we've got, right? Which Scott has mentioned. Whoever's living in our boundaries that's the talent pool we've got. And it's not fair, like you said, to have that spot, whether they win state or not. Well, they didn't give an opportunity for a team that, had to play with who they had to go to state. So I see both sides, but I definitely see, as a small school guy, I see the small schools attitude toward this as, those it's an unfair advantage for them to have this huge pool to draw from while we have this pool. But yet we get the same amount of seeds to state, right? In our conference. So is that fair? No, I don't think it is. I'll actually jump on the side of the fence where no, it's not fair. What do you do about it? I don't know.
I guess we wait for more private schools until there's enough to have.
I think that's a great idea.
Schools do their own thing.
Private. Yeah, everybody.
We could be heading there. More and more schools are popping up every day.
Sure.
So,
yep.
All right. Well, this was a really good conversation tonight, guys. We had a lot of participation from the fans. And this, to me, was one of the milder topics we're going to touch on. I think it's just going to get spicier as the summer goes on because we're going to talk about, we'll do these every couple of weeks where we bring a big roundtable topic to the table. But, at some point, we're going to talk about player transfers, student transfers, school choice. That could be wide open soon. We'll talk about state tournaments, max preps, expanding, all that good stuff, all the topics that the fans want to weigh in on. Cameron Anderson, head football coach at Burley. Paul, it isn't fair for everyone else that you are the best looking dude there.
It's just not. But what do you do? At least Cameron's not on, because then he would take that. Although, take a look around here. There's some not bad looking guys on here in this Brady Bunch type of thing.
I wish I would have formatted it where the three guys with the hats were on top and the three guys who were brave enough to show their hair were on the bottom.
Or lack thereof.
Yeah, for sure. There we go. All right.
Cut it that short.
Right. Cameron says facts. Yep. We'll end it there. Thanks to everyone who tuned in to weigh in on this topic of classifications and enrollments, and then we dabbled into private school versus public school for sure. And Cameron says he's a strong Idaho 6. He likes the 6A. Or is that 6 out of 10?
We should have numbers to hold up.
Yeah.
The Canadian judge only gave him a 5.
Yeah. There it is. Okay.
Face.
One last reminder before you duck out. If you could hit that like button, subscribe button, and then share this, retweet it wherever you're watching. That'll help everybody who couldn't be here live tonight. Find it a little easier tomorrow, next week, next month, whenever down the line. So big thanks to all of you tonight as well. Paul, Scott, Logan, Sean, Ryan. We had every area of Idaho covered. And so that's what we want to do. Stay tuned. We'll have our next off-season roundtable in a couple of weeks. Topic to be determined, but it'll be a good one. I promise that. And until then, keep checking back in at IdahoSports.com. We're getting more and more schedules put in. We're getting more and more content up as we navigate our way through the summer season. So, all right. Big thanks to everybody for tuning in tonight. We will see you next time here for another off-season roundtable discussion on Idaho Sports.